he will change some things on the federal land, right? And is there much that can be done for California from the federal aspect if the state doesn't change its policies?
I look at our forests. You know, we've got multiple national parks here in California. In my county, about half of our forest is managed by the U.S. Forest Service. So the federal government directly can have authority and control over those areas that they are managing right now, aside from what the state of California wants. Now, clearly, the federal government needs to work with the states that, where they have lands that they manage. Unfortunately, the state of California, the governor a few weeks ago came out and said that they are going to work against the Trump presidency and work against a lot of these policies that President Trump is going to be coming out with to try to make the United States better. So my hope is when the president takes office on the 20th of January, California will reconsider, because I do believe President Trump wants to make people's lives better. He's made clear that his America First policies, some of the tariffs that he wants to levy on other countries, his whole goal here is to really try to rejuvenate our economies overall. So I'm hopeful that California will reconsider its stance when it comes to trying to take on the Trump presidency. But yes, the federal government and the state of California do need to work together, because a lot of these things may end up in federal court if the state of California chooses to challenge the president on all these new policies he will be bringing forward.
So when it comes to water, there is the federal side and the state side of these pumps. There are some pumps that when you talk about the Delta, can you explain to us how these work?
So the way the Delta works, there are pumps, and depending on the water levels and the amount of rain that we get and snow that we get in the mountains and the flows that take place into the Delta, these pumps can be turned on to actually push water south to our farmers in Fresno County. And unfortunately, because of fish issues, the Delta smelt, because of flow issues as well, very little water has been pushed through those pumps back to our farmers in Fresno County. And so while I'm not an expert specifically on those pumps and when the pumps can turn on, what we have seen happen is fewer and fewer acre feet of water flowing back to Fresno County and farming communities that are really south of Merced. And that is something which is challenging our economies and making it more difficult to farm here in the Central Valley.
How do the farmers get impacted based on what you're hearing from people in your community and other communities around you?
One thing that's happening right now is we have a water district called Westlands Water District. And with the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act taking effect in California, effectively what we are seeing is hundreds of thousands of acres of farmland on the west side being fallowed. And we're seeing a lot of these lands actually, solar panels being put on these lands, because California has a new energy mix that's in place for where our power needs to come from. And so the conversion from ag lands into solar farms is happening because farmers have this land that they can't farm because they don't have enough water for it. And so what's sad about all of this is we have lands in the Central Valley that can't be found anywhere else in the world because of the amount of sun that we get, and again, the arid environment we have. We're able to produce hundreds of types of crops, but a lot of that land on the west side has to be fallowed because we don't have water enough to farm all of our lands. So that is how farmers right now are being impacted, as more and more lands are being fallowed, especially on the west side of Fresno County.
Was there a moment that you realized this water is becoming an issue for farmers, that they come to you or they start telling you about it?
So I'll tell you, water in the Central Valley, water in California has been an issue ever since California was founded. And I look at some of the projects. We have had no major water project in California, no new dam built, really since Pat Brown was the governor in the 1960s. But California, if you look at the population of the state, we've gone from, a state 50, 60, 70 years ago that was under 10 million people to today we're right at 40 million people. But the infrastructure that we have to serve the 40 million people hasn't changed much in the last 50 years. So what needs to happen is, as we continue to grow, and the state has policies right now that they push down on local governments saying you need to build more housing. Well, you can't build more housing unless you have more water. And if we're going to grow as a region, we need to have more food. Because if you don't allow for farmers to farm and you don't build more infrastructures for dams, all you're doing is creating policies and penalizing people, and the cost of everything goes through the roof. So if you look at just housing costs, what's happened to housing in the last 20 years, you've seen prices double and even triple in some areas. I laugh when I hear policymakers in Sacramento talk about affordable housing. I built affordable housing for 15 years. I ran a construction company, and building affordable housing is not hard. But in the state of California, as you raise minimum wages, you make housing more expensive because everything involved in that house goes up. So I laugh at Sacramento because all these challenges that we face, Sacramento thinks that we're going to solve problems by passing another law or raising another tax. You can't throw money at these things to fix it. But one thing that would is deregulating a lot of the regulations which are already in place. I look at the lawsuits that many general contractors have to face when they put a shovel in the ground, and all that added burden of insurance that they have to carry goes back into the cost of that particular home. So if you want more affordable housing, what you need to do is reduce the amount of regulation. You need to create incentives for entrepreneurs to get back into the field of construction and being a subcontractor too. But again, here in California, we're very litigious. All of these things combined have made it very difficult to build more storage projects, to build more housing. And again, in Sacramento, you have policymakers who shake their fists and want to blame corporations for all these problems and issues. But the bottom line is the policies that California has put into place is the reason that things are more expensive. We don't have more housing and we don't have more water.